it was also very hard to be able to talk to a medical professional and be taken seriously when I was saying, there are times that I won't eat for a month and I throw up my food, or food makes me unhappy and I can't deal with eating, and all these complicated problems that you would hope that medical professionals might be able to deal with. And the first thing they told me was, you're overweight, you should really concentrate on losing weight. So I think this is an important panel, like Kathy said, not just for big people or thin people, because it affects all of us, and we all live in a shame culture that kind of robs us of the joy of our body.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to have you both on the panel. So you found this slide.
I found this slide about a week ago, and I thought that, wow, this really sort of encapsulates how I feel about body image, is that here you see a cube, and it really looks the same, but you can describe it in so many different ways, box, cube, empty, clear, glass. And that's how we can be described. We can be described in many different ways, and none of those are untrue, and all of them are valid. They just are. They're all neutral. And it shows that you can label yourself one way, and society can label yourself one way. But there is no one way that encapsulates everything that you are. And so if you think that you are too fat, too thin, ugly, whatever, in the negative context, it is just as true that somebody else out there, if you're looking for somebody else out there, thinks of that in the positive context. And so if you're going to take the negative from somebody and from society, from the world, you also need to take the positive. You have to yin-yang it, because it is detrimental. And my feeling too is that when you go to describe yourself to somebody, I'll always say, oh, well, is he interested in a Zoftig Jewish woman, But even that is sort of putting me in a box. You need to sort of look at yourself and say, okay, well, how would I describe myself neutrally? If you can't get behind the positive of it, describe yourself in a neutral way, because that's the easiest way to get to the positive, is my take on it. So, and then just focus on the positive part of yourself. Even act as if, which is a very old woo-woo term, but it's true, So that's my cube theory.
I really like what you said, because for me, when I'm over 300 pounds, and until I started dealing with the shame, if someone said something nice to me, it was always, but I'm fat.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 18 patents, a PhD, I have a career in engineering that I really love, and I do this because I love it too. But someone would come up and say, you're smart, and I would hear, but you're fat. So they could be using cube just definitions that were nice, and I wasn't even letting them in.
Like, she has a pretty face.
Oh,
it's too bad that
but
she's fat.
Yeah. So, and some of that wasn't out there. I mean, we want to distinguish, there's all the stuff out there, and there's plenty of stuff. We'll show you some statistics. There's plenty of stuff out there, but there's a lot of stuff in here, and we have the most access to changing what's in here the fastest. Do you have anything to add on that one?
Okay, this is one of the slides I came up with, is we're all sexual, and everybody is different. All bodies, depending on the age, your sexuality, how you could be trans, you could be bi, you could be big, you could be small, tall, whatever. We're all going to be sexual beings, and all of that is valid. Well, if you're asexual, that is a sexuality, but and it is also a valid sexuality. We need to embrace that it's not something that you have to wait for until you look like whatever your preferred group says is the ideal. You have to be you in the now, the sexual being that you're going to be in the now. That's the only way we can enjoy our sexuality.
Yeah, I love this picture because it shows all different body types. We're not really given role models in general. It's kind of fetishized, or in mainstream, bigger women just aren't shown as sexual unless it's a joke. So I really love this. Thank you for. So when we were going through the data on this, gathering all the statistics, and this is just a fraction of what we pulled together. Some more is there's some handouts up in front next to Ashley, but it kind of felt like we were wading through a sewer because it was so immense how deeply this permeates our culture. And we are, from the moment we're born, we're trying to figure out how do we fit into the world? How do we be valuable to the world? How do we survive in the world? Our brain naturally does that. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just what happens. And our primitive brain, the part of our reptilian brain, the part of our brain that evolved tens of thousands of years ago, is always looking for ways to be safe. And when we see that we're not a valued part of culture, or there's something wrong with us, we want to push that away. So a lot of us are pushing our bodies away, trying to say, I'm not part of that. And then we have no control. We have no connection to our sensuality or sexuality. Mm-hmm. Do you want to share some of the statistics we found? It's going to switch.
Did you want to talk about how young it starts? One of the most startling things we found was how early it starts for young people to devalue their bodies and see it as a negative. We found an article where a mother who thought that she was raising a pretty, confident daughter who's 7 years old, she found a diet list. This poor kid wasn't even old enough to really know how to spell diet correctly, but she was already saying, I need to lose weight and I need to be a better person and my body is going to reflect that I'm a good person. And these are the images that we're seeing. It's happening with younger and younger people. We're seeing boys and girls and everybody develop eating disorders a lot earlier. Before, the onset of eating disorders happened around puberty or prepubescence about 12, and now you're seeing it in 5 and 7-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. And it when it starts that early, it gets embedded into these old tapes that you hear over and over again. And there was just a study done in Maine that said that college students they would prefer rather marry an embezzler, a drug user, or a shoplifter than someone who's fat. So it shows you where your value system goes, because we're told that a certain image equals value. I think I was just listening to the parenting, sex positive parenting yesterday, and to me that's such an important part of just being any sort of activist, is learning how to talk to your children about how to view people and how to see beauty and how to see value in other people that isn't about what they look like. Because when you take that out of the equation, you're able to see the authenticity of each person and have a more vulnerable experience in your friendships, in your relationships, in your acquaintances, in your business relationships. And you grow as a person when you're able to do that, when you're able to go beyond seeing the outside of a person and seeing a whole person. And that includes integrating your sensuality. Even if you're not overtly sharing your sensuality, you're at work. You give off an energy of an integrated person, and you carry yourself in a different way. And that way can be called confidence. But for me, it is what a whole person, what we hope a whole person is. I mean, we continue to learn throughout life, hopefully. But sexuality is something that is so, sits at the children's table of all of the senses, I think. And it is something that people with any body image issue tends to put on the back burner because they're not allowed to feel that way.
Yeah, you're supposed to wait until you're slender and then
Right.
you can worry about all of that. And it's not how it really works.
Nor should it, no.
So I'd love because this is so ubiquitous, it's everywhere, we see it constantly, it becomes almost like a fish in water. The fish may not realize it's in water because that's all it knows. So as we go through these, I'd love it if you started to think a little bit where this affects you in your daily life. And you may be a size 2, or you may be really happy with your weight and not feel like you have internalized shame, but I bet that it affects some of your friends and family, even if you have a really clear shame field, so to speak. And I know that I've cleared so much. I can say that I'm over 300 pounds and not, the first time I said it, I about choked.
Yeah.
Because you never say that out loud. It's so shameful, but it's a fact. I mean, I have fat cells under my skin. But why does that make me a less valuable person? We all have fat cells. If we didn't, we'd die.
And why do I need to be ashamed of it?
Yeah. So if you can start, when we start looking at how it's affecting us, when we start seeing it, it's like all of a sudden the fish realizing there's air up here and there's water, there's something different. And until we can see that difference, we're just gonna go along with the flow. We're being pushed by the media, pushed by society, which is caught in its own hamster wheel. It's just spinning on itself because it works, because we have the shame. And so as we start releasing that shame, it stops working so well. So I think it's horrifying that little kids are so dissatisfied with their body already. We're not teaching them how to love themselves at all. And like the number one wish of girls 11 to 17 is to be thinner. There's a lot of other things that I would rather have people wishing for and putting energy into the world. So we're talking a little bit about society and the other voices in our head. We do internalize those voices. We carry them around with us, and we were talking about some of the things we tell ourselves. I used to wake up in the morning and I'd look in the mirror and say, "You are a fat, ugly slob." That's what was in my head. Every time I looked at myself, if I got a reflection in a mirror or a window, that's what I told myself. I had learned that so thoroughly from society, because I fed that back on myself. So society could be out of the way, and I was still telling myself that.
Wow, does that resonate with me? You know, I think something turned for me. It was a catalyst. That while my emotions were real, it was important for me to remember that what triggered them may not be real. And that my emotional reaction to it is an invitation, is a sign for me to stop